obsessed with them, so I wanted to share them with you. I got this paper clip necklace that I think is probably one of my favorite pieces of jewelry ever. And I also got this necklace, which I love because it is double-sided, so you can wear it on the gold side, or you can flip it and wear it black. So basically it's two necklaces in one. And I also got this new ear cuff. I've been seeing ear cuffs everywhere, and I had to jump on the bandwagon. Anna Luisa is going to be running a Black Friday sale. This is a limited time offer, and you will find beautiful pieces starting from $39 up to some higher end pieces. So I will leave the link in the description box. Make sure to check them out. Today we will be talking about the disappearance of Heather Elvis. Heather Rochelle Elvis was born to Terry and Debbie Elvis on June 30th, 1993. Heather Elvis was a middle child. She had an older brother and a younger sister, and she was described as being just a very sweet girl. She was always helping others, particularly children. She was very religious. Her family attended a Baptist church, and she was involved in the church, and she often volunteered to help out in the daycare at the church because she just adored children. When she was 18, she went to Costa Rica on this missionary trip. And while most girls her age would go to Costa Rica to kind of sightsee and live it up, she was there for her humanitarian project. She was spending her time making a difference. She spent a lot of time at a local orphanage teaching children to read, and it was a very life-changing experience for her. Heather was a very artistic girl. She loved music. She loved listening to Lana Del Rey in particular. She graduated from St. James High School in Merrill Inlet in 2011. And after high school, Heather moved out into an apartment with a girl who she worked with. They started out as co-workers and became really good friends, and then eventually best friends. They moved in together and they were roommates. This girl's name was Brianna Goltzer. Heather was pursuing a career as a makeup artist. She was really great with makeup. She had an eye for colors, and she really wanted to show women how to bring out their natural beauty. While she was studying cosmetology, she worked 2 part-time jobs to be able to pay her way through school. She worked as a waitress at the Tilted Kilt and at the House of Blues, which were both located in Myrtle Beach. So Heather was essentially this all-American girl, your typical 20-year-old, living, working her way through school, hanging out with friends, making memories. She had a very bright future repairs on industrial, like ovens, refrigerators, industrial equipment, I guess you could say, and he often went into the Tilted Kilt to work on some of their equipment, and this was how he met Heather. The attraction between the two was very instant, but nothing really happened at first because Sydney was a married man with 3 children. He was married to a woman named Tammy Moore. Tammy and Sydney had been married since 1998, and while Sydney was up, trying to get his business up and running and very busy, Tammy stayed home with their 3 children. By all accounts, their marriage was great. There were no issues. There were no red flags. Sydney did have a minor criminal history for some shoplifting, and he had been in some kind of altercation with Tammy's father at one point. So that's a little background information on Tammy and Sydney. So Sydney meets 20-year-old Heather Elvis, and there is definitely some kind of connection, some kind of attraction, but she knows he's married, and so they just kind of flirt with each other every time they see each other, and that's kind of as far as it goes. Heather would look forward to the times that Sydney would come into her work, and she would just kind of giggle and flirt very shamelessly with him. At least, that was all that happened for a while. But at some point, this harmless flirting turned into a full-blown affair. Heather's roommate Brianna would later say that Heather really liked Sydney. She said, quote, "She just sat there and blushed as she talked about him." I do think both Heather and Sydney realized what they were doing was wrong, but the chemistry between them made it difficult to stop once it got going. They had this passionate love affair over the course of a few weeks, and suddenly it came to a very explosive end in October of 2013 when Tammy found out about the affair. Brianna later said, quote, "When the whole thing was found out, it blew up like a bomb. Tammy was livid, texting Heather," end quote. So Tammy finds out her husband is sleeping with a woman half her age, like Tammy was 40 and Heather was 20, and she loses her mind. And I understand being very upset, but this woman takes it to a whole new level. She begins calling and texting and harassing Heather. She is furious, and she is constantly threatening, constantly harassing, and it just isn't stopping. It is not relenting at all. She's not getting over it. It's just continuing. Eventually, one night, Tammy calls Heather, and I think her husband's sitting right there, and she basically is like, this is over. Stop seeing my husband. And then she hands Sydney the phone and listens while Sydney ends this relationship. Over the course of this phone call, Sydney kept reiterating that Heather meant absolutely nothing to him, that she never did. He basically just tore Heather down, said he was using her, she was nothing, and I think he was really kind of maybe trying to put on a show for his wife to make sure she believed him when he said She took his phone and put a password on it that only she knew, so if he wanted to use his phone, she had to unlock it for him, and she basically took over control of his phone. She went everywhere with him. If he wanted to go to the store, she went with him. She spent her days going around to restaurants with him while he worked on their equipment. And it is reported that she even handcuffed her husband to the bed at night so he couldn't sneak out and go see his lover. And if all that is not crazy enough, Tammy took him to a tattoo parlor and insisted he get a tattoo on his lower stomach of her name. So Sydney is dealing with this insane wife, and Heather is dealing with a broken heart, and she's trying to move on, but Tammy just continued to torture this girl. In late October, Heather received a text from Tammy that basically threatened to beat her up, and then it said, quote, "You can tell me where you are right now, or one way or another, I will find you, but that won't have a great turnout for you. I'm giving you one last chance before we meet in person, only one," end quote. A few minutes later, she texted back, quote, "Hey sweeties, ready to meet the missus," end quote. Heather didn't respond for several days to these text messages. I think she didn't want to engage, and she kind of wanted to de-escalate the situation. She finally did respond, and she said, "I think you're a little obsessed with me. I am nobody you need to worry about anymore." 5 days after Heather sent this text, she was with Sydney in person for the last time. Now, investigators haven't released anything about this, how they know this, but they have said that on November 5th, the two were together, and this is the last time that they can prove they were together. On November 19th, Tammy and Sydney, along with their 3 children, took off to California for this month-long vacation at Disneyland. And while they were gone, it seemed like Heather kind of had a little bit of a room to breathe. She started to act like her normal self. She was heartbroken. I think she very much had feelings for Sydney. And not only was the relationship over, he was treating her horribly. His wife was harassing her. And that is very heavy for a 20-year-old girl. But while they were gone, she started to hang out with her friends a little bit more. She even started dating again. In December, Brianna, Heather's roommate, left Myrtle Beach and went to Florida for the holidays to visit her family. But of course, the girls still talked and texted almost daily. While Brianna was in Florida, she gets a text from Heather, and she's really excited because she's going on a date with this new guy who she's met. This new guy was Stephen Sherardi, and she went out with him on December 17th. He picked her up at her apartment. They went out to dinner. They drove around to see Christmas lights. She loved looking at Christmas lights during the holiday season. And after that, they went to this empty parking lot, and he was teaching her how to drive a stick shift. He had a truck that was a stick shift. Now, a little backstory. Heather's father also had a stick shift truck, and he had tried to teach Heather to drive it, but she just couldn't ever figure it out. It was kind of a joke. But she loved this truck of her dad's, and she really did want to learn. So she's on this date, and this man, Steven, is teaching her to drive. And she's so excited. She has him take a picture photos ever taken. Stephen took Heather back home and dropped her off at her apartment between 1 and 1:15 a.m. Now, police have a very specific timeline in this case, so I'm sorry if I'm looking down a lot, but I do have, like, down to the minute timeline that I want to make sure I give you guys. Around 1:17 a.m., Sydney Moore is seen inside a Myrtle Beach Walmart buying a pregnancy test. At 1:35, Sydney calls Heather from a payphone. They talk for about 5 minutes. Surveillance footage positively places Sydney inside the phone booth making the call. At 1:44 a.m., Heather calls her roommate Brianna, and she is extremely upset. She says that Sydney just called her and said he loves her and he misses her and he wants to leave his wife to be with her. And Brianna is like, no, you are just recovering from this. Do not get drugged back into this. This is not a healthy situation. You do not want his wife going crazy. Just don't do anything. Go to sleep. Think about it. Like, we'll talk tomorrow. And Heather agrees. She's like, yeah, I'm just gonna kind of surf the internet for a while and then I'll go to bed. At 2:29 a.m., Heather calls the payphone that Sydney had called her from, but no one answers. At 2:42 a.m., Heather's cell phone pings at Longbeard's Bar and Restaurant in Carolina Forest. At 2:57 a.m., she leaves Longbeard's and heads to Augusta Plantation Drive, but then she turns around and heads right back to Longbeard's. At 3:16 a.m., while she is still at Longbeard's, Heather's cell phone attempts to make a call to Sydney's cell phone, but this call is not answered. Then she leaves Longbeard's and goes back to her apartment, and she arrives there at 3:19 a.m., but she isn't in for the night. While at home, she tries to call Sydney's cell phone again, and this time the call is answered. This call lasted 4 minutes and 15 seconds, and police would later say that Sydney's cell phone was at his home when this call took place, and Heather's phone was inside her apartment. At 3:25 a.m., Heather's phone leaves her apartment and heads towards Peachtree Landing, which is this secluded, wooded area. There's a lake and a boat landing. Her phone stops at Peachtree Landing at 3:37 a.m. At 3:36 a.m., a private home security system picks up a dark-colored Ford F-150 coming from the direction of the Moore residence and heading towards Peachtree Landing. At 3:39 a.m., Heather tries to call Sydney's phone, and again there is no answer. She attempts to call several times, like back to back to back, and none of these calls are answered. Also at this time, 3:39 a.m., a business surveillance tape picks up a dark-colored F-150 heading in the direction of Peachtree Landing. At 4:41 a.m., Heather once again tries to call Sydney's cell phone and gets no answer. By 3:42, Heather's phone stops all activity. So it was either shut off or it died. At 3:45 a.m., this same business surveillance camera catches what appears to process it for evidence, but they would find nothing. So the next day is December 19th, and no one hears from Heather. Heather was independent, and it wasn't super unusual for her to go a day or two without talking to her family, but her parents did think she would call at some point to talk about this date and kind of brag about how she had finally mastered the stick shift in a car. They weren't concerned when she didn't call, though, until that night when there was a knock at the door. And when Terry Elvis answered, it was a police officer. The police officer told the Elvis family that a car registered to Terry Elvis had been found abandoned at Peachtree Landing. And this was super confusing. No one could figure out, first of all, whose car it was. Terry at first told the officer he was mistaken because all of his cars were in the driveway, but then they realized that this was Heather's car. So Terry didn't know what was going on, but he did have the spare keys to Heather's car, so he grabbed them and drove with the police officer to Peachtree Landing, where Heather's car was parked sideways at the boat landing. As they approached the dark green Intrepid, Terry opened the car, and both he and the officer looked through the car, trying to see if they could figure out an explanation for why it was there. Now, the car was not damaged at all. It was in working condition. There was gas in it. It was messy, but according to Terry, that was how Heather kept her car. But the thing was, Terry couldn't figure out why his daughter's car would be left in this secluded area. And he began trying to call her phone, and her phone was going straight to voicemail, and this was very unlike her. Her phone was never off. And he tried to think of one reason that made sense. One reason why her car would be there without her. But he couldn't, and he really started to just feel sick to his stomach. At Peachtree Landing, where Heather's car was, there didn't appear to be any signs of struggle. Nothing pointed to foul play, and nobody thought this was a crime scene, so the police officer and Terry both searched through the car, which, as we know, would have contaminated a crime scene. Heather's purse, cell phone, and keys were not found inside the car. Terry began frantically calling his daughter, but all of her calls just kept going to voicemail, and this caused the panic in Terry to continue to rise. After looking through her car, the police officer, who again, they do not suspect a crime has taken place, allows Terry to drive it home. And this would end up being a huge issue because the car had not been properly processed or photographed. Once it became apparent that Heather was missing, police immediately believed foul play was involved because they looked at this affair and the harassment that had been going on, and they just knew something bad had happened. The next morning, when the sun came up, police conducted a search in the area where her car was found, but they found nothing significant. Over the next few days, several searches were conducted by police as well as various community members and family and friends, but nothing was ever found during these searches. No trace of Heather was found, nothing They didn't know who, and they didn't know why, but they did believe that Heather had come to Peachtree Landing to meet someone, and that she left with this person willingly. Police were getting tips called in about the case, but none of these trips seemed to be credible, and of course they still had to spend hours and hours tracking down the tips just to make sure they didn't lead to anything. One of the first things police did was track down Stephen, who was the last known person to be with Heather. He fully cooperated with police. He was interviewed and polygraphed, and he passed his polygraph, and police cleared him. He had a clean record, and they did not believe he was involved in her disappearance in any way. 2 months go by, and police are working this case, but they just keep circling back to Sydney and Tammy Moore. When police had originally spoken with Sydney, he had lied about his whereabouts on the night Heather went missing, and he had denied making that phone call to her from the phone booth. Later, when confronted with the evidence, they had video footage of him inside that phone booth. He said he had only gone there that night to call Heather and tell her to leave him and his family alone. He had no explanation when police asked him about the other calls that were made that night from Heather's phone to his cell phone, which had been answered. So, the first time police interviewed them, he says, "I was at home sleeping." He said, quote, "When I go to sleep, I am handcuffed to my bed, and Tammy is the only one with the key," end quote. But later, he had to change his story when they showed him that they knew he had made that call. And so he said, that he just needed to tell her to leave his family alone. Police found no indication that Heather had ever tried to contact Sydney or Tammy in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Sydney and Tammy were the prime suspects in this case pretty much right from the beginning. Police ended up searching the Moore home about 2 months after Heather went missing, and a few hours after they conducted this search, Sydney and Tammy were both arrested. 6 warrants were issued for the couple. Now, they had warrants for indecent exposure, obstruction of justice in relation to the Heather Elvis case, and kidnapping. Now, this indecent exposure charge stemmed from them having a sexual encounter in public with each other, and I'm pretty sure it had nothing to do with the case, but they just tacked that on there. In February of 2014, Sydney Moore filed several police reports saying that he was being harassed, random people would drive up next to him and shoot at him with semi-automatic weapons. They were driving very aggressively. He tried to say that Heather's father was the one doing this. However, police were never able to, prove that this had ever happened. None of these gunshots ever hit his car or him or anyone in his family. While both Sydney and Tammy would claim that Heather's family was harassing them, police never had any proof that this actually happened. Then, on February 24th, 2014, police hold a press conference where they announced that Sydney Moore was being charged with the murder of Heather Elvis. According to the warrant, both Tammy and Sydney had done something to Heather, quote, unlawfully, without just of sufficient cause, and with malice aforethought, end quote. Now, investigators never revealed evidence they discovered while they were searching their home that led to these kidnapping and murder charges. They did say that they had some sort of DNA evidence, and they did believe that Tammy and Sydney had kidnapped and killed Heather Elvis. Now, their bill was set at $100,000 each, which is pretty low considering these circumstances. I think the judge was very lenient with them, and I don't understand why. In fact, once they were bailed out, they were claiming that they were being harassed. They were saying Sydney could not find work. Nobody wanted him to work for them anymore, and so they were allowed to move from South Carolina to Florida, and a judge signed off on this move. This case became a 2-year court battle, and it was like a back and forth, and then suddenly the murder charges were dropped from Tammy. Kidnapping charges were downgraded to pending. On June 20th, 2016, Heather's murder trial begins, and this is when a bomb gets dropped in court. Information is released saying that it was believed Heather was pregnant at the time she went missing. According to her manager at work, Heather had been gaining weight, and she had taken a pregnancy test that had come back inconclusive. Now, I have no idea what this means. I'm sure they brought in an expert because a pregnancy test is positive or negative. I've never heard of a pregnancy test being inconclusive, but this is what was told in court, so I don't really know what that means. Another manager that also worked at the Tilted Guild said that Tammy had called in and basically demanded that they fire Heather. She had said that she was claiming that Heather was running all over town, saying that Sydney had gotten her pregnant, and these rumors were embarrassing and it was ruining her life, and so she was basically demanding that they fire Heather. No, they did not fire Heather because this is insane, and Tammy was acting crazy, and this manager knew that. Plus, she was a really good worker, and they liked Heather, so they were not going to fire her just because they were being told to. Now, remember, police have Sydney on surveillance buying a pregnancy test the night Heather went missing, and he would later try to claim that Sydney and Tammy were trying to have a 4th child together, and that was why he was at Walmart at 3 a.m. buying a pregnancy test. His trial ends in a hung jury. It was 10-2. 10 people believed he killed Heather Elvis. Now, I just want to point out, there were 2 people who did not think he was guilty, and one of these jurors happened to be the best friend of Sydney's attorney. And for whatever reason, the judge did not see this as a conflict of interest because he promised he would not let his friendship with one of the lawyers affect how he saw the case. This is obviously a conflict of interest, but the judge didn't think that it was. So, anyways, this trial ends in a hung jury, and Sydney takes to his Facebook to just rant. He rants about Heather. He basically says he was not in a relationship with Heather. She wasn't even a fling. She was just a girl who chased him around. He then suggested that somebody else was to blame for Heather's disappearance, and that person was Heather's father. He said that Heather had been abused when she was younger by her father, and she was starting to talk about it and wanting to go to police, and Terry Elvis killed his daughter or made her disappear so this would not happen. Now, I just want to point out that if Heather was no one, not a fling, not anything but someone who chased Sydney around, why would she tell this day, her body has never been found. No one has ever come forward with information, and she is still considered a missing person. So there are a couple theories in this case. The first one is that Heather just left. She took off. She had talked on Twitter about how she hated living in a small town, how she was bored and there was nothing there for her. So some people believe she just took off. I don't believe that at all. She didn't need to disappear. I do not think that she would have. That just doesn't make sense. There are other people who think that this guy she went on a date with is responsible. Now, he initially totally cooperated with police. He was interviewed, he took a polygraph, he passed a polygraph, and that was that. But then police got Heather's cell phone pings, and they started trying to line up his story of where they went, when they went there, with Heather's cell phone pings, and it didn't quite add up. So they asked Stephen to come back in to be re-interviewed just so they could clear up some discrepancies. And at this point, he stopped cooperating with police. He also refused to give police access to his cell phone records, and he changed the seats in his car after Heather went missing. So I don't know. I don't think he was responsible. The seat thing in the car is weird, but I really think he just didn't want police to try to pin this on him, and when they came back around asking questions, I think he just got nervous and stopped cooperating. Now, like I said earlier, there are several people who believe that Heather's father is responsible. While I was researching this, I found absolutely nothing that made me think he was in any way responsible. I think he is a victim in this case. He is a grieving father. He had a great relationship with his daughter, and in my opinion, he had nothing to do with this. Now, the last theory, of course, is that Tammy and Sydney kidnapped and killed Heather. I agree with this theory. I think they were responsible. I think what happened was Tammy used Sydney to lure Heather away from her house out in the middle of nowhere. I think that she either had him drop her off somewhere on the way to pick Heather up, or she was maybe hiding in the back of the truck. He pulled up, Heather jumped in, and they took off. Remember, there's only a few minutes between the surveillance footage of him driving to Peachtree Landing and driving back home. What I think happened was these rumors that she was pregnant were making Tammy even more insane than she already was. And so Sydney went and bought a pregnancy test. They made up this plan that they were going to take her and force her to take a pregnancy test. I don't know if Sydney thought that this pregnancy was just a lie and he wanted to prove to his wife so she would stop handcuffing him to the bed. I don't know. But I think they forced her to take that test, and when it was positive, they killed her. That is just my theory. I, of course, want to know what you guys think. Now, Heather Elvis is still considered a missing person. At the time she went missing, she was 5'1" and weighed 110 pounds. She was a Caucasian female with brown hair and brown eyes. She has the following tattoos. She has a 6-inch compass rose on the inside of her forearm, a 6-inch stylized sea turtle on the left side of her torso, an infinity symbol on the right side of her torso, a small ocean wave on the outside of her wrist, and a sugar skull on her thigh. If you have any information about the disappearance of Heather Elvis, please please call authorities at 843-915-5350. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and a huge thank you to Anna Luisa for sponsoring today's Mystery Monday. Just a reminder, they are having an amazing Black Friday sale, and I will leave the link in the description box, so make sure to check out their limited time offers. I quickly just want to cite my sources for this video. I got information from Wikipedia and the Charlie Project. I got information from a People.com article titled "Friend of 20-Year-Old South Carolina Waitress Missing Since 2013 Speaks Out" by Christine Bazelik. I got a WPDE article by Annette Montgomery titled "New Videos and Text Messages Released in the Heather Elvis Case." Oxygen.com had an article titled "Man Sentenced to 30 Years for Kidnapping Mistress, but Victim's Family Doesn't See It as a Victory" by Jill Setterstrom, and episode 33 of Trace Evidence by Stephen